This is a review of test number 2 to help prepare you for the retake. The first question gives you the graph of the polynomial x plus 3 times x plus 1 cubed times x minus 2 squared. And it's asking for the degree of this whole function. So when an exponent is missing, so this x plus 3 doesn't have an exponent, that means the exponent is 1. So put a little 1 there. Now to find the degree of a polynomial that is being multiplied, you're going to add the exponents together. So in this case, we have 1 plus 3 plus 2. 1 plus 3 plus 2 is 6, so the degree of the polynomial is 6. Then it asks, what is the multiplicity of the 0 at x equals 2? So if you remember, the zeros are when you do the opposite of what's in parentheses. So if I want the 0 at x equals 2, I'm going to be looking for when x minus 2, what is that exponent there? So in this case, the exponent is 2. So the multiplicity is 2. If I ask for the multiplicity, if I just make another random question down here, what is the multiplicity of the 0 at x equals -1? So I would look at the parentheses that say x plus 1, because I'm doing the opposite. Opposite of -1 is +1. And then its multiplicity is what is the exponent. So the exponent with x plus 1 is 3. So the multiplicity is 3. The second page, we're going to complete the end behavior statements for the polynomial g of x. Now, I would like to sketch g of x before I talk about the end behavior. So I'm going to use the Desmos app, unless you have a graphing calculator at home. If you use the Desmos app, you're going to plug in the equation that they gave you. So I have -2, parentheses, x plus 5, times x plus 3, times x minus 4. And then it gives me the graph. You can zoom out so you can see it a little bit more clearly. If I zoom in, I can see where the x-intercepts are. So we have an x-intercept. I don't know if you guys can see. The x-intercept is at 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So at +4, I'm going to put a point. It also crosses at -3 and -5. Now I'm going to zoom out so I can see the general shape of the graph. It looks like if I'm coming down from the left, I come down, go through my x-intercept, turn back around, come up, and back down. So I'm going to sketch that. This was going down, Looks something like that, right? At least I have the right directions for my ends. Now as x approaches negative infinity, remember negatives on the x-axis are to the left. So I'm asking, what is the left side of the graph look like? Well, the left side of the graph is pointing up, so it is going towards positive infinity. Now, as x goes to positive infinity, this is the x-axis, these are the positive numbers, so I'm going to be looking at the right side of the graph. The right side of the graph is pointing down. Down is negative infinity. All right, going to the third page, we have Ivan performs polynomial division, and you can see the whole division thing there. It says, is x minus 1 a factor of x cubed plus x squared plus x minus 3? So x minus 1 is what I'm dividing by. And this equation is on the inside of my division problem. So it is only going to be a factor if the remainder is here. If the remainder equals 0, then yes, it is a factor. So the remainder is 0, so yes, it is a factor because the remainder is 0. If the remainder is any other number, then you would write, no, it is not a factor because the remainder is not 0. Then it says to write the factorization. And this equation is once again the yellow one. It's what I'm trying to divide. So the factorization is what you are dividing by, which is this x minus 1. Okay, multiplied by your answer. And my answer in this case was x squared plus 2 plus 3. Wow, I can't say that right. X squared plus 2x plus 3. So it's the orange, what I'm dividing by, multiplied by the answer. Then it says to solve the equation. Once again, this equation is what I'm trying to divide. And we just wrote the factorization. So what you do is you set each of the factors equal to 0. So you would set x minus 1, set this factor equal to 0. And you can solve that. You would add 1 to both sides. You get x equals 1. So that is one part of the answer. Now I'm going to take the other factor, the x squared plus 2x plus 3, and we're going to set that equal to 0. Okay? Now, this part of the equation doesn't factor. So instead, we're going to have to use the quadratic formula. So if you remember, the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And the a, b's, and c's come from the coefficients. So whatever's in front of the x squared, that's our a. If there's not a number here, then it's going to be 1. The b is in what's in front of x, and the c is the last number without any x's. So I'm going to plug those into my formula. So we have negative 2 plus or minus 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times 3 divided by 2 times 1. And we just have to simplify it a little bit. We have a negative 2 out in front, plus or minus the square root. And you can actually do this part in the calculator. You are just putting in what is underneath the square root. Do not put in the square root, so just what's underneath of it, which is 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times 3, and we get negative 8. Now the last step that you need to do is when you have a negative underneath the square root, that becomes an imaginary number. So this technically equals negative 2 plus or minus. The I takes the place of this negative, and you put it outside the square root. So we technically have 3 answers for this problem, which makes sense because it's cubed. So we have x equals 1, that's one answer. We have negative 2 plus I square root 8 over 2. That's the second answer. And the third answer is negative 2 minus I square root 8 divided by 2. And this is the last page. It wants me to divide p of x by x plus 3. So if you remember, we're going to use the synthetic division. We have to do the opposite of this one. So instead of having x plus 3, you can set it equal to 0. You can solve, and you get x equals negative 3. That negative 3 goes on the outside of your synthetic division problem. Then you take the coefficients of p of x and you line them up inside the little box. So the coefficient of x cubed, there's no number there, so you write a 1. The coefficient of 5x squared is 5. The coefficient of 14x is 14. And then you just have the number 30. For synthetic division, you bring the first number down, and then you multiply negative 3 times 1 equals negative 3. 5 plus negative 3 is 2. Multiply again, negative 3 plus 2 is negative 6. 14 plus negative 6 is 8. Negative 3 times 8 is negative 24. 30 plus 24 is 6. Now when we write our answer, we start with the exponent that is 1 less than what's written here. So we're not going to use the x cubed. We're going to start with an x squared. So this answer is going to be 1x squared plus 2x plus 8 plus, this is the remainder, 6 over whatever you divided by, which is the x plus 3. Then it asks, is x plus 3 a factor of the p of x equation? So x plus 3 was what I was dividing by. Okay. This equation was my p of x. And remember, it is only a factor if the remainder is 0. So did I get a remainder of 0? No, I got a remainder of 6. So it is not a factor. because the remainder is 6, not 0. The last question is asking me what is p of negative 3. Now you could technically take this negative 3 and plug it into the p of x equation. But I taught you a shortcut. P of negative 3 is going to be whatever the remainder is. In this case, the remainder was 6. So the answer to this question is 6. It says p of negative 3 equals 6. And that is the end of the second test.